Hey, welcome back to the Female Founder World podcast. I'm your host, Jasmine Garnsworthy, and today I've got a conversation with LeAnn Darland. She's the founder of TALEA. Let's get into it. LeAnn, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Let's jump in with a bit of an introduction to what you're creating at TALEA. For those who haven't seen your spot in Williamsburg and haven't seen you on shelves in stores, what are you? What are you creating?
So TALEA is the product that my co-founder and I created. Her name is Tara. My name is LeAnn. So the name is a portmanteau of ours. But we are two of the very few women in craft beer in the US who have created our own brewery and beer brand. And we are on a mission to bring beer to non-beer bros. So that could be women, it could be men, or anyone of any gender who doesn't identify as, the hyper cool kids craft beer club member. So just trying to make it more fun, playful, accessible, and approachable through our brand, our voice, and the types of beer we're making.
I did a little bit of research about you and your co-founder before the show, and you both have quite an interesting background that maybe I feel like it'd be interesting to talk about where you're coming to this from. Where did your career get started?
So I went to undergrad at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and studied economics there. Always loved small business, CPG type concepts. While I was at the Naval Academy, I was really into all of Howard Schultz's books about building the Starbucks empire. But I graduated there and then served for 5 years as a signals intelligence officer in the Navy. So that took me around the world. I did a few deployments to the Arabian Gulf, a few in the Western Pacific, and was fortunate enough to be stationed in Hawaii and San Diego. While I was in San Diego, it was 2013, which was a huge craft beer boom in the US. And there in San Diego and on the West Coast in particular, things were really taking off. So I fell in love with all of the different craft breweries there in San Diego. That's what I wanted to do when I got home from work every day, was go to a new brewery, go to a new tap room. It's a very casual environment compared to a wine bar or a cocktail bar, but always new things to choose from and such a wide range of flavors that were available. So at that point, it kind of planted a seed in the back of my mind that, having a craft brewery of your own would be a really great CPG company, but a very creative, expressive product to try to bring to market. So after I got out of the Navy, I pursued a career in corporate finance and moved up to San Francisco. I worked at Google for about 3 years in their finance operations department, and just felt like it was a bit too big of a company for me. I wanted more scope more quickly, to get the level of responsibility and impact I wanted at a place like Google. It'd probably take me a decade, if that, right? So I knew I wanted to start something of my own. I was still always thinking about craft beer. So I started to homebrew. I went to get my MBA at night at Berkeley and ended up leaving Google to join a beer e-commerce startup as their head of finance. So this was a great way for me to still leverage my professional experience, but dip my toe into the industry that I was interested in jumping into, but wasn't quite ready enough to just go all in and start a brewery because I knew nothing about the actual industry and the economics associated with having a brewery. So I joined that company as the head of finance. We were quickly backed by a big beer company and raised tens of millions of dollars and moved the headquarters to New York City from Berkeley, California. And that is where I met Tara. So this was 2018. We posted a job for head of customer experience and her application came across my desk. So I was just shocked that there was another woman willing to leave a very stable career to explore her love for craft beer. And I convinced her to join. And within 3 months, we had formed an LLC that's now TALEA. So we became fast friends and really jumped into a wild venture together with barely knowing each other. We were both married. We were both 32 at the time. So it's a pretty big commitment with one another. But that's kind of my path leading up to starting TALEA with Tara.
And what year is this now that you started the business?
So we formed the LLC in July of 2018, stayed at our jobs at Hopsy. So we were in total stealth mode, hid it from the CEO for a while we did the research to figure out like what does it take to get a beer to market. Our whole goal was to get a beer on the shelves at Whole Foods. Like that is what we consider success. And so we were getting the permitting. We were finding a contract brewer who would brew our recipe to our specification. We ended up buying a van so we could actually like go around and do deliveries when we actually had a product in hand. Like all of the admin work to set up actually bringing a beer to market, we did while we were still employed at Hopsy. That took about 9 months. So as soon as we had a beer in hand, we quit our jobs because we had to start going door to door around Manhattan and Brooklyn, knocking on the door of these bars and restaurants and trying to get meetings with Whole Foods just to get people to buy our beer. So that at that point, when we had our first beer in hand, that was April 2019.
I'm really curious about the decision. You have this beautiful space in Williamsburg, which I've like been to with my friends before, and you can do like a flight of different beers, and it's a really great like casual space to hang out. Why did you decide to not just go the route of having a ready to drink product that you could sell into Whole Foods and sell online? Why did you decide to have the space as well?
As we were doing the research to bring this beer to market, we very quickly realized that we were not going to be paying ourselves anything if this was the route we were going. So, wholesale, the margins aren't great. For a keg of beer that we sell to a bar, for example, to sell to their customers, we might make $250 on that keg. If we sell it in our own tap room by the glass, we'll make well over $1,600. So the margins in a tap room it's basically taking a bar and vertically integrating the supply chain. So it is an incredibly profitable business model and is really the only way to sustain a craft brewery at this point, which is why so many craft breweries have their own tasting rooms right now, because wholesale is so competitive and there's no way we could ever hit the price points of some of the larger craft beer brands in the market. So we realized quickly that we needed our own brewery and we needed our own tasting room and eventually as many tasting rooms as possible, which is what we're working on now. Shipping beer over state lines is very complicated. It's illegal unless you have licenses in each one of those states.
Oh, wow.
So it's not like wine or spirits. It's very strict.
Why?
They're just 3-tier distribution laws that were left over from post-prohibition that have never been changed. There's a lot of legislature out there right now proposing changes to make it more like wine, where you can be a wine member and have shipments from California every month. You can't do that with beer. So it's very challenging. And the company we came from before we started TALEA was in beer shipments, and it ultimately didn't work because the distribution laws were so complex. So tap rooms are the beer D2C, and we're really leaning into that. So we started a fundraise to be able to build a brewery in New York City, which is very expensive, and also had to get an SBA loan that was personally guaranteed by the two of us to bring the vision to reality.
Wow. Okay. Talk me through the thinking behind getting that SBA loan. Were you nervous about doing that? What was the like, how did you feel about going through that process? Because that's yeah, that's a commitment.
Yeah, I mean, we ideally didn't want to have to do that. I think the first big leap we both made in like fully trusting one another and going all in was when we left Topsy and didn't pay it, like had a zero salary. And we're pouring our own funds into contract brewing this beer. So negative salary, we in total we both probably invested about 100K into that initial proof of concept and weren't being paid. So we fortunately have very supportive husbands, and we had a career 10 years before that to test that out a little bit. But we had an agreement with our husbands that if we hadn't raised $1 million in 6 months, then we would have to like take a step back and reassess if this was going to work. And we did. We raised that much. We started to pay ourselves, I think, like 50 or $60,000, and were able to continue fundraising. So we raised a little over 2 million in a year. And as we started construction and the build out, that was only about half of what we needed. So we were forced to find other lending options. And we secured the SBA loan it was like the middle of 2020. It was in the middle of the pandemic. So we just had to. And I think, everything will work out fine financially. But it is a huge, I mean, we own nothing. We're $2 million in debt between us and our husbands. And now we both have kids, and, it's a lot on the line.
Yeah. Yeah. All in.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Jasmine, and I'm jumping in to interrupt this episode so that I can invite you to an event in New York City. This is our first in-person event. It's taking place on April 7th at 6 p.m. and it's free. We're hosting this in partnership with Shopify, and it is going to be the ultimate evening curated especially for consumer brand founders or really anyone who's entrepreneurial minded and interested in the consumer brand space. I absolutely welcome you and would love, love, love to meet you on the night. There's going to be a structured networking event so that you can meet your people, find other people building amazing businesses without any of the awkwardness. Then we're moving into a panel conversation, and I cannot wait to announce the speakers that we have on the panel. It's going to be awesome. So stay tuned for that detail. We're also going to have free food and free drinks available all throughout the evening, provided by your favorite woman-owned companies. You have heard from a lot of the founders of those brands on this podcast. So it's going to be awesome for you to try them in person. And this is a totally free event, but you do need to register because numbers are limited. Head to our Instagram account at Female Founder World, hit the link in our bio and sign yourself up. I cannot wait to see you there. I'm really curious about how do you go about creating a brand and an experience where you are essentially reaching an atypical consumer of the product that you're making? Like, how do you even think about that?
Still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But we, there's about 8,000 breweries across the US. Less than 3% are owned only by women. So we loved craft beer, but we could never convince like our moms or our girlfriends to like go brewery hopping with us. When I lived in San Francisco, the thing to do was go to wine tastings. You make a day of it in Napa, and you would get dressed up and you had reservations, and it was this beautiful experience. And Tara did an internship at Wolfer Estate Winery in New York right after her MBA, and her family has a long history in hospitality, in particular in wine. And so from her perspective, she was like, no brewery is putting in the effort that these wineries are to make a memorable, beautiful experience and to create that relationship with customers where it's somewhere you want to get married. It's somewhere you want to have a baby shower, a bachelorette party. Breweries are way more known for being industrial and, like barrels for tables and chalkboard menus. It's not a refined experience. So we believed wholeheartedly that only 30% of craft beer drinkers across the US are women, but that number is growing. But no beer brands are actively speaking to that audience, especially in the same way that hard seltzer is targeting the female consumer. Rosé and most wines are targeting a female consumer. Beer just isn't. And we wanted to be the gateway beer for a lot of people who didn't see themselves as beer drinkers. There are still cans on the shelves at most major retailers now that are called Arrogant Bastard, Boom Sauce, Raging Bitch, Sword Swallower, unbelievably misogynistic at worst and like sporty at best branding that will not resonate with a young professional woman who wants to like be thoughtful about what she drinks and where she spends her money. Like, you're not going to grab an Arrogant Bastard. But if you grab like a Sun Up or a Bravada or a Lunch Date, or, you know, a lot of the branding and the names we have are meant to speak to that consumer. You know, we're trying to fill that gap in the market.
So we have like a bit of a split, like of the founders that come on the show, and some of them come from, they have like formal business training and background. They've done an MBA, they've worked for as a management consultant or, you know, down that path. And then others have just kind of seen a gap in the market and have just like gone all in with like one and learned on the job. How much do you think of what you're doing now is informed by what you learned at business school, and what is just you're figuring it out as you go in the moment?
So business school, there's one class that I think, maybe two classes that I think I reflect on and use on a regular basis. One was a negotiations class, and one was a class on venture capital. We don't have any venture capitalists on our cap table, but just knowing the language and understanding term sheets and everything like that is essential if you're fundraising. I'm saying that those two classes were helpful only because you can go and learn that yourself. You do not have to get an MBA to do that. For me, and I believe for Tara, the absolute most valuable experience we had that helped us so much with this business was working at a startup together before we launched this business. So I was the head of finance, but I was running payroll. I had to figure out liability insurance. I had to figure out like what the hell is workers' comp, like trying to get better credit card rates for your corporate cards and expensing, like all of the things that are not sexy and that they don't teach you in business school were the most helpful starting our own company and understanding what was really needed. And that, again, is something that you can always figure out on your own. But we were able to learn at a startup that we didn't own, the good and the bad, and what we wanted to take to our company and what we wanted to absolutely leave behind before starting our own. And that, I think, was the best lessons learned.
What were some of those key things that you took away from the negotiation class in your MBA?
The concept of BATNA.
What's that?
So I think that stands for the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So
Okay.
you only have as much, whoever has a stronger BATNA will likely win the negotiation. So for example, if we're negotiating on a new space that we want on the Upper West Side in Manhattan, and we have no other options, or let's say the best alternative is like a small rundown bodega, then like we have a pretty low BATNA. We have a low best alternative. On the other side, if the landlord we're negotiating with has us or has a Danny Meyer concept, their best alternative is like looking pretty good. So you have to have a full understanding of what your counterpart's BATNA is to know how hard you need to negotiate. So that's a really important concept that will drive all negotiations. And the second piece of information that I found fascinating is like, who makes the first offer? So if you're trying to hire a senior person on your team and aren't really sure what they want for compensation for a salary, there's this concept of anchoring. And you almost always want to be the first to propose a price or to propose a service agreement or whatever it is that you're working on, because that will set the anchor. And over time, or like based on a lot of research, the final negotiated agreement is always skews far closer to the anchor. So if you're going in for a job and you know you want 150,000 for a salary, you should go in first and anchor at 180, because if they have the budget for it, then they're going to like maybe meet you at 160, and then you're in a good position. Whereas if they come in first and they're like, we can offer you 100, that's really hard for you to convince them to go up to 150, and they know that, right? So the concept of anchoring is really interesting too. And again, like you can research all of this on Google, and there's a ton of information about it.
Interesting.
I could go on, but those are some good ones.
That is so interesting. Okay. And then LeAnn, the last question that we ask everyone who comes on the show is just to share a resource. So that could be a book, it could be a podcast you listen to, a group that you're part of, something that has kind of helped you as you've grown TALEA.
So podcasts I love, and then I find a lot of similarity with your podcast is how I built this, of course. And one of my favorite books of all time is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, which is a story of Nike and the Nike founder and just the insane journey he went through to eventually build such a like dominating brand. So those are kind of two resources I would recommend.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show and for telling us all about TALEA and what you're building.
Thank you. So happy to do this.
Hey, did you guys love that? If you did, please drop us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you take a screenshot of that review and DM it to us on Instagram, we will send you back a link with free access to our entire on-demand library of business skills workshops. So don't sleep on that. Get on it. Take that screenshot and DM it over to us. Chat to you later.